So our presentation is on from construction project to building operations, ensuring mission critical facilities are operationally ready. AI continuing education information and course description. So our course is on going beyond traditional commissioning processes, ensuring mission critical facilities are operationally ready. Commissioning data centers and other mission critical facilities require going beyond the traditional process to ensure a seamless transition from construction project to building operations. Unplanned outages on unprepared systems and staff can have serious consequences for ongoing operations. So how do you ensure that these mission critical facilities are operationally ready? How do you integrate operational readiness into your existing commissioning process and elevate your role in that process? So Craig and I are going to present on this, and we will take a detailed look at how, what tools are available to ensure the operational readiness. How can they help you in making sure that the buildings are operationally ready? And we'll also share our field experience in getting operational ready buildings, getting mission critical facilities operationally ready. All right, a couple of words about myself. Alex Kozinets. I am Chief Product Officer at Facility Grid. My background is in mechanical engineering and commissioning. I've been in the industry for 25 years, so I've designed and commissioned different building types, and now I'm with a commissioning software.
Good morning, I'm Craig Eadie, obviously based in the UK, so it's quite nice to be over here in America for a change. We run a pretty large commissioning management company, or commissioning agent, in the UK, but we work all over Europe. So we do data centres, office buildings, residential projects, pretty much the same as what most of you guys probably do. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you to Alex for inviting me. So yeah. Good.
All right. Well, now you have two different accents going on. Learning objectives. So we're going to start by going over what it means for a mission critical facility to be operationally ready. We're going to look into how to integrate operational readiness into existing commissioning process, understand the tools that are available to enable commissioning providers as they work continuously with building owners and contractors to deliver operationally ready facilities, and then we're going to look at some real-world examples.
Okay, so obviously, data center projects are very, very complex and they're very fast. And one of the biggest challenges that we have today really is, well, there's two things. Resources, because our industry, sadly, we don't have enough people. We don't have enough young people coming into the industry. So I would encourage everyone to start a graduate scheme, bring the young people into the industry, because there's just not enough young people in the industry today. An average data center project takes about 11 months to build. So you're talking about a $100 million, roughly, project in 11 months. So they're fast. So we need to be able to provide the right level of resources to deliver the project on time, to make sure the client is satisfied, but equally that it's tested and commissioned properly.
So the world of construction is changing, right? We're all seeing this, right? There's new systems that coming on board, like for example, micro-module facilities, package cooling systems. The designs are really complex, right? So when engineers put buildings these days, you try to implement as many energy efficiency features. The buildings must be sustainable. They have to be resilient. So there's a lot goes into the design of those buildings. But someone actually needs to understand how to operate those buildings, right? Because your engineers, they attend different conferences a lot of times. They read different They understand new technologies. The people who are running those facilities, they're not necessarily aware of all those different types of features. So now you have to make sure that when whatever is designed and then made operationally ready is understood by the building owner. Obviously, regulations, standards, get more and more tighter, and obviously they all have to be stuck to. So energy efficiency and resiliency, like I said, there's a important requirements in today's buildings. Now the teams working on projects, they can be in different locations, on-site, off-site, but they also have to be in a loop. They have to know what's happening in buildings. Obviously, construction schedules are getting tighter, even though buildings are complex. And with all of that, the owner still expects the buildings to be operationally ready day one, right? They still want the schedules to be met and the cost to be met, okay? Before we continue, can anybody raise hands who understands what operational readiness is, who heard the term? All right. So operational readiness, by the way, comes from the oil industry, right? Where obviously the deadlines and the requirements are very tight. Then in the United States, it was, and obviously across the world, it was used in the airspace industry. So like airports, they all have the process of getting the airports ready, airport projects ready for operations. Now, what does it mean for a building to be operationally ready? There's three components. The first one is building systems and equipment, right? So you have to make sure that the building systems and equipment properly tested, commissioned, and are ready. Then the second component, which is also very important, are people who will be operating that equipment, right? Because if you test everything, and again, everything works, so the day you leave that building and give the keys to the building owner, if the building owner staff does not know how to operate that building efficiently, well, it's not going to be, it's not going to work as expected, as designed. And the third component is the information, right? So when the project is completed, all the information, whether it's a digital data, just information related to equipment, systems, that can be passed to digital twins, can be passed to CMMS system, or just systems manuals, operations manuals. They all have to be available, and that needs to happen on day one of the project. So ideally, day one of the project, systems, people, and informations are all available, and that will help the building to be to operate sustainably throughout its life cycle. All right, how do we get there? Okay, so operational readiness is, like I said, it's a process, right? So it mimics your commissioning process, and in order for that to be successful, we all know that you have to establish the requirements or the goals from the beginning of the project. Okay, commissioning is providers commissioning a process can be used, right, to conduct these activities related to operational readiness, right? Most of the operational readiness activities are already part of the commissioning process. That process must involve all stakeholders. It's not just the commission provider that is responsible. You have to make sure that everybody is involved. You have to make sure that the building owner, the subs, the vendors, they're all involved into the process. Again, because if they're not, that at the end of the project, you're not going to be able to succeed and deliver that operational readiness. You have to make sure that the status of all the these activities is on everyone's radar at all the time, right? You cannot just say that we're going to start looking at operational readiness at during level 3 testing or level 4 testing. You have to make sure you're way ahead of the game, starting from the beginning of the project. You have to make sure that all those activities are integrated into the construction schedule, right? and you have to track your activities against the construction schedule. You have to be able to provide instant access to information, because when you have to make a decision in terms of what's more critical, what's less critical, what must be done, what are the minimum requirements for that opening day of the facility, right? You have to be able to provide status to all the participants instantaneously. And then you have to understand critical path, right? Critical path, because we all know we've all been working in projects where there's a deadline, there's a certificate of occupancy is supposed to be issued. You have to be completed with certain activities, and unfortunately, we're not there yet, right? So, but sometimes with data centers, we'll talk about the data centers, why it is important to be fully done. But on some other types of projects, you may not, you may not be completed 100%, but you have to understand what is that minimum requirements for the opening day, right? And for that, you have to understand what is more critical in the facility, and you have to track that. What are the benefits and who benefits from delivering operationally ready buildings? Well, everyone does. Well, obviously the building owner, when a building owner puts together owner project requirements, the intent of those requirements is for that building to be operationally ready at day one, and operate sustainably throughout its life cycle. Commissioning providers, well, obviously, because again, that the operation readiness process mimics the commissioning or follows the commissioning process. So as the commissioning teams are required to make sure that the buildings are operationally ready per the owner project requirements, so that meets their goal. Understanding of deficiencies, project deficiencies at any point of time, and so you can easily get to that information and address it. The contractors obviously are benefiting. Why? Because if they work diligently with the project team and address deficiencies as much as possible, and those deficiencies identified, then there will be obviously minimum callbacks at the end of the project, which means happy client, better relations for future projects. Now, what are the common challenges in delivering operation-ready buildings? So these are related to pretty much any type of project, not just with data centers. So number one is disconnect between the project schedule and the commissioning and quality control activities, right? We've all seen construction schedules that just show 2 months and then the project will say commissioning, right? Well, if you see the schedule and if you do not say anything, if you do not engage with the construction team to make sure that the entire operation readiness process is outlined within the schedule, most likely by the time you get to those 2 months, the construction schedule is going to start sliding. When you see two months chunk of time at the end of the schedule,
it becomes 1 month, doesn't it?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Commissioning is not important. Most clients now, unfortunately, the GC, they just want commissionings are like the bit at the end, and they always try and squeeze that part of the program or the schedule, instead of actually seeing the importance of commissioning and actually understanding better how important it is to hand over a building that actually works. And unfortunately, it's been endemic in the industry for forever,
Well, that's absolutely right. And then, so I talked already about the O&M personnel. Again, knowing what is the intent for the building. When they walk into the mechanical room, they need to understand why is that piece of equipment there, what's the intent for that piece of equipment, how it's intended to operate, what does it mean for that piece of equipment to operate per the design requirements, what is the correct operation, what is the standard operating procedures, emergency operating procedures. So all that information is obviously something that you need to convey to the building owner staff. Otherwise, again, the operation of the building is not going to be successful. And then reports, documentation, and then documentation, obviously it has to be available day one, right? Especially in a critical facility where that building is going to be operational as soon as you turn over the building to the owner. So again, that transition must occur on day one. All right.
Okay, so apparently, so Alex tells me, the ASHRAE commissioning levels isn't actually commonly used in America, which I find quite astounding. But when we do data center projects in Europe, the commissioning levels, ASHRAE levels, is very prevalent. That's how we deliver our projects. But is that true? How many of you guys use the commissioning levels? 1, 2. That's it? Wow. So why is that? Is it because it's just not the way things are done here, or because I always thought the ASHRAE standards were like the Bible, in the US.
You're referring to like guideline 0 for ASHRAE?
Pardon me?
You're referring to ASHRAE guideline 0?
No, the levels
The
of
commissioning levels.
commissioning.
Yeah. Only on mission critical, or yeah. So on a general like office building or something like that, you don't follow that structure. Wow, interesting.
So it's actually interesting because the contractors do follow the process. Contractors do use those levels, and they do concentrate on level 2. They actually break level 2 to A to B. So all their what they call pre-commissioning activities are level 2. And so, and it's interesting because the engineering team, commissioning team, is not even aware of, like outside of the mission critical facilities, that these levels exist.
So when you set up a project over here, do you if you don't use the levels, how do you what's the general way it's done? Is it done with an Excel spreadsheet, and you obviously list out all the assets that you're commissioning, or what? Just out of interest for me, really, actually, I'm keen to understand how things are done over here as well.
Are you talking about levels, or are you talking about delivery software?
So levels, yeah. So delivery of the project, not necessarily software. Just how do you set up the project? Do you is the first thing you do produce the asset list and then work from there, or?
Yeah, I mean, back at level 0 is design phase, right? Developing your assets.
Yeah.
So it's based on the RFP. So your owner's telling you what he wants to commission.
Yeah.
But that is not necessarily tied to level itself. On that base.
Where are these levels defined, or who decided the 6 levels as they're defined here for you over here?
Sorry, say it again.
Where did the definition of these levels come from? Where did you define those 6 levels? Because I don't think they're in ASHRAE, they're not in IECC, they're not in LEED. Those are some of the basic guidelines that we use for our processes often.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
So these are the levels that we, with one of our mission critical customers. So we set the levels with them, but they are based around the ASHRAE levels. But obviously, there's slight differences between them. But it's all about knowing where you are on the project at any one time. So what we tend to do as well, we actually put labels on the equipment as we commission it for each level. So if you walk around the project, you'll see actual labels on the switchboard or generator or whatever it might be. So as you walk around the project, you can see exactly where you are on the project. Has it been commissioned? Is it level 1? Is it level 2, 3, 4? So you can understand exactly where you are.
And so when Craig mentioned ASHRAE standard, so when we start working with Craig, and Craig started asking us about these levels, I didn't know anything about levels either. And like, Craig's...
And you're on the ASHRAE committee.
Craig, yeah. And Craig was saying, well, ASHRAE commissioning level. I did the research, and there's nothing about the levels.
Alex, this gentleman's got a question.
Yes.
Well, no, I think that so I've done a lot of mission critical data center stuff, and then others as well. I think it's not necessarily the same language, but it's still the same process, right? Yeah. Because we talk, I think, more in standard building commissioning as in phases. So you're in the pre-design phase, design phase, the construction phase, acceptance phase, and then ongoing and commissioning. So it's just kind of a difference in terminology. I'm also familiar with the tags on the equipment where you go off the thing for data centers in Europe. But it's just, I think, a difference in terminology.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, commissioning's a process, isn't it? It goes from A to B, you know, and it has to be done correctly. And how you get to that process, you know, is different on residential projects, it's different on office buildings. Data centers, obviously, have got, you know, they like to think that, you know, they're super complicated, but they're not really. They're just buildings, you know, they're not that complicated really. But the process doesn't change. Yeah.
Well,
Same process.
Yeah, exactly. Totally agree.
I don't know why people are confused or have problems with those numbers up there. But if you were to list those things out in a column, the words, starting with 0 at the top, 6 at the bottom, every spec I see on mission critical details, everything.
Correct. So, and as I was saying before, for the building to be operational ready, the entire project team needs to speak with the same language. They need to understand. And so, what you just said was you have construction and then acceptance. But if you talk to contractors, okay, they have a pre-commissioning process, pre-commissioning phase. So if you think what's commissioning starts at level 0. So you think pre-commissioning would be before level 0, but that's not what they intend. When they're talking about pre-commissioning, they're talking about that. This is where they run their ISTs. That's where they run their static tests and everything else, right? So the reason we're bringing this up here is because you have to make sure that these activities, especially level 2 activities, are very critical. Because if these are not done properly, if you don't speak the same language and don't identify these activities on the construction schedule, right? The level 3 is not going to be that successful.
Well, I think the issue is as well, though, generally, you know, commissioning starts at the design phase on a project. That's when commissioning should really start. But unfortunately, most general contractors, and certainly in the UK, and I'm guessing probably over here, we always get appointed too late on the project. You know, you always get brought in at the last minute, you know, as opposed to right at the start when you can actually have an impact on how the project's delivered.
So Craig, what happens if the mission critical facilities are not operationally ready?
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, the biggest challenge we always have on data center projects is making sure that the building's finished, complete, the commissioning's complete at handover. You can't afford to change things after the building goes live. You know, once Amazon or Google or whoever it might be are in there and they've got the servers up and running, you can't change things. You can't go back and recommission stuff, so it has to be done complete. And to allow us to do that, we need to use software to allow us to track the project all the way through from start to finish and understand, so at any given time we know exactly where we are on the project, exactly what needs to be done, and more importantly, actually what's not done. It's all very well saying, you know, this is all complete, but actually what's not complete. And that's the key thing, is making sure that you by using software, we're able to track and monitor the progress and know exactly where we are on the project at any given time. Sorry, I can't see that.
I know it's small. Key strategies for success.
Okay. Yeah, so key strategies. I mean, obviously, we work with one very big data center customer, and we try and work on an 80-20 process. So all of our test scripts and checklists, 80% of them never change. So if you're commissioning a LV switchboard or a UPS system, 80% of that test script never changes. 20% of it does. And it might have to be localized because it's a project in France, or it's a project in Italy, or it might be a project in America. So you need to localize that 20%, but 80% of it never changes. So it's allowed us to build a global database of test scripts for our projects. So we can actually hit the ground running, you know, and we can actually get a project set up very, very quickly, right from the start. You know, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. And we can share that information with our competitors as well. You know, this one client we have, our competitors, who also work for the client, use the same test scripts as we do. Well, why not? You know, everyone's too precious about, that's mine, I produced this test script. Well, no, you know, as an industry, we should share information. If you produce something that's good, share it with the industry, because it makes us all better. It makes us all more efficient, and we can all make more money as well. Which is what, listen, that's what we do for it, surely.
Technology.
Okay, so technology, using technology. Obviously, when I started Straightline Consulting 5 years ago, I met Alex and Eric, and we wanted to use technology to drive the business, and we wanted to use software to drive the business, because the old Excel spreadsheet approach, it just doesn't work. You know, and an Excel spreadsheet is only true and current the minute you press save. As soon as you press save, it's out of date. So being able to report to our clients, always in real-time reporting, was really important to us. So we found Facility Grid, we searched around and looked at different platforms, and that was the one we chose. And there are obviously other platforms available, but being able to report to your clients and giving your clients that transparency is so important. You know, you can't hide behind Excel spreadsheets anymore. You know, commissioning agents have been doing it for years using Excel spreadsheets, and it just doesn't work anymore, in my opinion.
No, exactly. And now that we're working with the same client, and that client now sitting in UK and managing global data centers, and seeing data centers in Singapore or Dubai or anywhere else in the world, they have instant access to that information, right? As soon as something happens on the job site, as soon as something starts falling behind the schedule, there's access to that information. And the important piece here is that if in a mission critical facility you do not react as soon as the problem arises, as soon as something happens on the job site, you're going to start falling behind the schedule, and you're not going to be able to recover.
I think as well, obviously knowledge is power on any project, so you've got to know where you are. And I think, you know, by us using software platforms, by sharing our ideas with our competitors as well, because, you know, I always find it really difficult to understand, like, how everyone just wants, you know, I produced that test script, it's mine. Well, it's not. You know, just share it with people. We could all be much better at our business and actually make more money and be more productive if we actually shared resources and shared what we're good at. You know, I think as an industry, we've always been very protective about, you know, that's my document, I produced that, you know. Well, it's not really when you think about it, because your client who's paying you to produce those documents, they own the document, not you. So I think as an industry, we need to try and share information better. We need to try and work better together, because I think, you know, too many people, like competitors, well, we're all competitors, but we might as well just share information and work collaboratively.
So when we talk about the data centers, right? So what was your, I guess, what allowed you to be successful with that data center client, for example?
Well, I think obviously we've been very lucky. We've got a very good client, or 2 or 3 very good clients in the data center space. But I think obviously it's all about the people. You know, we've been so fortunate to be able to employ some really good engineers, and obviously all of us are only as good as the people that work for us. And I think we actually brought across probably 20% of our staff now are ex-oil and gas, and the skill sets are so transferable from oil and gas, because these guys worked on oil rigs, so they're used to being away from home. So if we want to send them to a data center project in Holland or France or Italy or wherever, that's fine. They're used to being away from home. The QA/QC process within oil and gas is probably more stringent than in data centers. So they understand the importance of getting things right, and they're always good engineers, because on an oil rig, you have to fix it. you can't just go down the hardware store and buy some parts. You have to fix it. You're on an oil rig. You're in the middle of nowhere. So we found that. So any of you guys that are looking for people and trying to recruit at the moment, look at the oil and gas industry, and it's actually not that busy at the moment. Certainly in Europe, anyway. The skill sets are there, and it's so easy to transfer them over to what we do.
What happens so I talked about the operation readiness, these three parts: building systems, people, and documentation. What happens in a data center if once you commissioned, you test everything, you walked away from the data center, and now the building personnel does not understand, does not know what to, how to operate it, because over the time there may be new features, new systems have been added.
Well, it's quite a common problem, obviously, and I think as well the operations teams, they don't actually want to accept the building, because they're scared, because they're nervous of their own abilities. So when we do all the client training now, what we tend to do now is we video. All of the training sessions get videoed, just like this gentleman here's videoing. So therefore we've got a video record, so when any new staff come onto our project, they can watch the video as part of their induction. We can upload the video training sessions onto the software platform that we use, and it also gives us a clear record of what we've done on the project. And it's dead easy. It's not expensive. The client really gets the benefit from it, and it's a lasting record. So if you don't do that at the moment, I'd encourage anyone to try and start selling it as a service to your customers. But obviously find a good video company that can work with you, because we've had some very bad videos, quality videos, but yeah, it's definitely something worth doing.
In addition to that, so the training on a typical project, training is left to the end of the project, right? So basically, last, couple of weeks, or maybe last month, right? You put these groups together, and a lot of it is a classroom training, right? Not hands-on training. So what we found was that the best projects or best way to get the operations people ready is actually get them involved into your commissioning activities, right? So when the project is being tested, let's say you start a startup, right? So get the operations personnel there.
Definitely. I mean,
right?
you always want to engage with the operational team during the commissioning process, and if you can bring them into the process at level 3 or level 4, and they're actually witnessing and verifying the commissioning, because by the way, obviously once the data center goes live, they're never going to get a chance to switch things off again. It's the only opportunity they get to actually operate the equipment is during the commissioning process. So I mean, the earlier they become engaged in the process, the better.
And we are talking about mission critical data centers, but also if you are working
in any project,
in a hospital, in a lab building. So these types of buildings, they all have their standard operating procedures, emergency operating procedures. If this is a client who has already existing facilities and now they're building a new facility, so a lot of times the H&S departments will assume that the standard operating procedures, emergency operating procedures will be the same or similar in a new facility. But that is not necessarily matches the design intent, right? I've worked on projects where in a lab building you have a biological safety cabinet, and the biological safety cabinet is an emergency power, but not the fan that drives it. Okay, and the reason it's not is because there was never a procedure that called for that cabinet to operate in emergency mode. The way you code this, the way you address this, is that you have to make sure that as you're performing tests, as you're performing verifications, you have operations team there as well with you, right? They can be involved, they can see what happens in all these types of procedures. For example, lockout, tagout procedures, right? So the building staff needs to understand what the process is, and if part of your activities that you're, part of your scope, you are verifying these procedures, then can be present with you. This is part of their training. Now, how do you make sure that they are aware of these activities? Again, I mentioned the scheduling part, and so you have to make sure that your entire operational readiness process is outlined within that construction schedule, so that the operations team know when those activities are coming up. They understand all the opportunities at which they can learn what's going to happen in the building. This is how I started up. This is how I test these different items, so that's important. And then the third component that we mentioned, the information, right? So you have to, from the beginning of the project, you need to understand what type of information your client wants and at what, in what standard, right? So for example, if your client intends to receive data to augment their BIM model, or maybe to populate digital twin, and they want the data to come in, let's say, COBie file, which is the industry standard file, right? So,
is BIM really prevalent in the US now? Is it?
Everybody knows what COBie data is?
Yeah.
Yes, one or two people, right? So COBie standard, that's, and UK, that's because where BIM is mandated by
the government,
by the government. So in order for the building owner to get their BIM model updated with all as-built information, right? So the data comes from two places. The as-builts come from the contractor, but if you're managing the collection of data, the equipment and system information, in the platform, maybe using spreadsheets, but hopefully not. So most of commissioning software these days provides you with ability to export data from the software in a format that can be then used to populate that building model. That format is called COBie, right? In order for that data to be exportable in COBie, it needs to be imported into the platform from the design model. In order for that to happen, that model, that BIM model, must be designed per the IFC standard, and therefore, then you can export the data from the model and then import it into a software. So, if the building owner does not state from the beginning that this is the requirement of the project, the design team most likely is not going to use that IFC standard. They're going to use most likely their own standard for building the model. And then that transfer is not going to happen. So we manage about 5,000 projects in our platform. There's only one project, University of Arizona project, that was with the design team, Burns and McDonald's, that they've actually, there was a requirement from the University of Arizona to the engineering team to make sure that the data is in that format, okay? And so that transfer happened successfully. Again, I just know one project where that actually happened. So again, establishing the requirements from the beginning, what the data needs to look like, in what format, is a key, right? So because if at the end of the project, all of a sudden you say, well, I need that COBie data, it's not gonna happen. Also, if the data needs to be part of the CMMS system, right? Think of airport, think of any other types of projects where as soon as that day one happens, right, you're gonna have to be able to generate and respond to work orders, right? In order for that work order system to be set up, let's say Maximo or SAP, that has to be populated with data. Where does the data come from? Can come from two places. One, the facilities people have to go to every piece of equipment on the job site, and they need to go to the nameplate and copy all the data and then populate it manually into the CMMS system. Or if you do use some type of a software for commissioning, if you populate that software with data, well, then just press a button, produce that file, provide it to to your client, and all of a sudden they can populate that database for the CMMS system, and you can start using
Do
it.
the US government mandate that they have to use BIM on projects, or is it it's still in infancy at the moment over here? How many of you guys are using BIM on projects?
It's project specific.
Project specific.
There's a lot of projects where they have to like scan it on a new daily BIM model updates.
Yeah.
Via scanning, and then they'll do.
Are they just using it for clash detection, or
Yeah.
mainly?
I mean, but they'll compare it against the design BIM.
Right. Okay. Okay. But it's not hugely prevalent then, by the looks of.
I mean, it depends on the.
Mandated.
Yeah.
There's no mandate.
There's no government mandate or anything. No.
It just depends on the project size, and it just comes down if they want to pay for it or not.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Right. So you would think that the design team spends hours and hours produces this nice BIM documents model, and then at the end of the project, then it becomes just a waste because it doesn't get updated with as-built information, and that's a problem. So obviously the latest technology is digital twinning, right? So where the models are now connected to real data in the buildings. Again, how does the data get there? Where does it come from? You have to establish it in the beginning of the project. The owner has to establish at the beginning of the project, and most of the owners don't understand, don't know what they want to get at the end of the project. And so should be our job, our industry job, to actually work with the owner during the hopefully owner project requirement stage, and to guide them to what would you want to get, what do you want to get at the end, okay? What is that opening day requirement, right? So the opening day requirement is that.
I think it's what does success look like.
Exactly.
You know, and
Exactly.
Customers need to be able to convey to the contractors, this is what success looks like. You know, so you can benchmark. You can do all the way through the project. You can benchmark areas on the project to make sure this is what success looks like. And I think, clients are becoming more and more engaged nowadays, thankfully. So it's much easier to actually deliver a project because you know what they want. Whereas 20 years ago it was, we just want a building, and it wasn't very clear, So I think, delivering what success looks like is really important.
So it's interesting. I was talking to someone earlier this morning, and we talked about the success. How do you success in the industry? Like how we succeeded in our, building commissioning platform. How did you succeed? Like how did you? So you started 4 years ago. We met in New York. You were just starting with your partner, and now you're one of the leading commissioning data center commissioning companies.
Yeah, I think obviously we've been very lucky in so much as we had a couple of very, very good clients who we delivered for, and I think you can never ever detract from the fact that you're only as good as your last project. So every project you have to deliver the project on time. You have to be the best you can be, and I think we're really lucky in so much as we've got some amazing people, and it's all about the people. The process. We use your software platform to deliver. It allows us to be transparent with our customers so they can see where we are on a project at any given time. But I think you've always got to go back on the fact that you're only as good as your people, and you've got to look after your staff. Pay them well, look after them, and they'll look after you, and your business will become successful because they I could call one of my guys at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night and say, I need you on site tomorrow morning, and they'll be there. So, but you've got to have that relationship with your team, and you've got to actually make them feel like they're part of the family, so to speak. And so I think it's really important to look after your team, and it's so difficult now to find good people, especially young people. The average age of our company at the moment is 54. So, and I've got this passion about knowing what the average age of the company is, and because it's never going to get younger, unfortunately, because there's, look around the room here. What's the average age in the room here? I bet it's about 54. So, where's all the young people? because they want to write software, they want to do code, they want to, they don't want to work in engineering because there's not enough money in it or whatever. So I think, we all need to look at our businesses and try and encourage young people into the industry.
I do have to add though, when you call your employee and ask him to be next day on the job site, the job site is probably in Italy or France.
Yeah.
Not in,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
right, middle of nowhere. So that's okay. So during COVID years, right? COVID times. How were you able? Because your data center jobs.
Oh, so
stuff,
COVID.
right?
COVID was a huge challenge for all of us, and obviously we just started, not long started the business, and we still had to deliver data center projects in France and Italy, and we had guys in the UK, so we had to get special government dispensation to travel. But then also what we started doing a lot of was video, using technology to factory acceptance tests, for example. All the factory acceptance tests, instead of traveling to the factory, we just do it via video. You don't need to send 10 people to a factory acceptance test. It's so, back in I don't know what it's like over here in America, but back in the UK, a factory acceptance test was always an excuse to go and get drunk for a few days. I'm pretty sure it's probably the same over here. But use technology. You can video it. You don't need to send 10 people, all those flights, all the cost, everything. So we adapted, but we were still able to travel. But COVID was a real challenge for all of us, I'm sure. I don't know how it affected most of you guys over here in the US, but you were locked down for pretty much the same time as we were, I think. Yeah.
So my last question to you is, so obviously that client, that data center client, your main client, why do they come back to you? Like what were you, how you deliver to them, right? So that, coming back to the operational readiness thing, what were you able to deliver that they decided to, I'm sure there are plenty of commissioning companies in UK, but what was that you had that?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Obviously, using the software platform so we can, they can be informed 24/7. So they can, Simon, our client, can log in to the platform. He can see all of his projects, and he knows exactly where they are. But I think the second thing is just our relentless passion to do things right and be the best. You can't. Unfortunately, there's a lot of commissioning agents, certainly in Europe, that don't do things right, and they, sign stuff off that's not right and not quite right. And you have to. It's your name above the door. You've got to make sure it's done right, haven't you? What's the point in signing something off if it's not right? You may as well go home. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be in our industry if you're going to get things wrong. So I think we've just got this relentless passion to be right and do things properly.
Right, and obviously in the data center, if you don't do it right,
well, yeah, you only get one chance, really.
That's right. That's right. So if we go back to what we were trying to convey to you guys, hopefully we did it, but so the operational readiness, right? I hope you understand those three components of what operational readiness is and why it is important, right? Again, if you only succeed with one component of operational readiness and you just do an excellent job in testing equipment and system and everything works as expected, you set up perfectly, implement all the design requirements, all the complexities, say you're doing a lab building, cascading, airflow control. So you've implemented, you make this all work, it's all perfect, okay? But you do not train the operators, they don't understand this. As soon as you walk out the door, we all know what's gonna happen, right? Control's gonna go to hand mode, set points will be changed, and the operation is going to be as usual. And obviously if you have a highly complex, highly efficient building, not used as intended, its operation is going to be
Well,
actually
so-
less efficient than if it wasn't.
So
energy
common
efficient.
nowadays, you know. How many of us have handed over a building that works perfectly, and within 6 months, you know, the operations team have managed to completely screw up the building, you know, because all the pumps are in hand, and every time they get a BMS alarm, they just put things in hand, and you know, so I think, you know, continuous commissioning is going to become. I think it's quite popular here in America, isn't it?
Ongoing.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you know, it's going to have to be more prevalent in the future.
Second, establishing the process requirements in the beginning. Again, so your client needs to understand exactly what they want to get at the end of the project. What is the minimum requirements for day one opening? Does everything has to be ready? Every VV box and every closet needs to be ready for that opening day? Maybe, maybe not, right? But you need to know this from the beginning. You need to understand what your critical path is from the beginning, right? And so if you understand the critical path from the beginning, if you track the critical path through all your level 1 through level 6 activities, right? So you don't have to wait until everything is went through, let's say, level 2, right? As soon as you know what critical path is, if a critical activity is done in level 2, you can jump in level 3 for that activity. You don't need to wait till everything is completed, right? If the client wants a project to be delivered in a specific format, whether it's BIM, whether it's CMMS, whether it's digital twin, the requirements have to be set in the beginning of the project. If they're not, the client is not going to get what they want. Define responsibilities and train people accordingly, right? So obviously, it is our job to make sure that when we put together our commissioning plan, we outline who is responsible for what, right? It is critical that everyone understands what the responsibilities are. You have to make sure that you actually don't wait till the time you produce the commissioning plan, because most of the time it happens during the construction phase of the project, right? And if those requirements, responsibilities are not set in the commissioning specifications, if they're not bought by the contractors, well, then that becomes extra scope for them, right? And there could be challenges, and the least thing you want to do on the project is start with challenging who's responsible for what, for those level 1 through level 6, right? Who's responsible for what? Who's signing off on level 2 activities? Who's watching that startup activities, right? So you have to make sure it's established. And then you do have to figure out the technology, right? Again, using spreadsheets these days or emails to communicate, it doesn't work, right? You cannot make a decision, especially in a mission critical facility, on where we are. You have to start your day by being able to open some type of a platform and clearly see, okay, this is where I am, and as Craig has said, this is what's not ready, right? Because if you just look at the typical...
I think clients need to be able to make an informed decision. They need to be able to get to the end, as you count down 4 weeks towards the end of a project, the client needs to be able to review what's done, what's not done, and make an informed decision on whether they accept the building or not. If it's a data center or even an office building, for example, if the toilet extract fan system hasn't been commissioned, well, okay, that's fine. But if the UPS system hasn't been commissioned, well, that's a big problem. So they need to be able to have the, knowledge is power, and they need to be able to make those informed decisions. And I think using software platforms that allow you to track that information certainly helps.
Right, exactly. And again, we've all been on projects where things are not 100% done, right? And like you said, right, being able for the owner to understand what's not done, and then who is responsible to complete it, past project completion, right? So if the owner like you said, right, the owner is afraid to take control over the building because they walk into the black box. They don't know a lot of times what's not done. But if you can clearly communicate to the owner, okay, we are here, all your day one minimum requirements are met. These are the items that have not been completed, whatever, some toilet extract fan or some other types of tests or whatever. But you've clearly identified what those tests are, who is responsible, when they're going to be completed. The owner will be able to make an informed decision is that they're comfortable accepting the building as is and understanding that someone is responsible for coming back and addressing whatever has not been done.
So we've only got about 2 or 3 minutes left, guys. So anyone got any questions or anything you want to add?
Is it more clear now what operational readiness is and what are we trying to promote to the industry, the importance of operational readiness or getting the buildings operationally ready? Yeah?
Good. Yeah.
Where we run into challenges is projects that are completed over multiple phases.
Yeah.
I was curious if you guys had any lessons learned.
Yeah, I mean, sectional completions, so you mean like spaced handovers?
My lesson learned is just helping the owner to define what their operational readiness means
At each stage.
Because if you don't, we run into problems where, the team is anticipating that, troubleshooting will need to occur over all 4 phases and after
Yeah.
each phase, but the owner might not be prepared for that.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, and I think it's how you educate the owner, I guess, and manage their expectation in so much as, these are the systems that you're going to get on phase 1, and then these are the systems you're going to get on phase 2, and then I think, but yeah, sectional completion projects are always a challenge because the owner doesn't ever quite understand what they're going to get. So I think it's all about, communication with the owner, making sure that they understand these are the systems, using markups, making sure that they actually fully understand it, and also video training, like I said earlier, train them on the systems that they're handing over at each stage,
And what we've seen was, because like I said, the levels, right, even though most of the people in the industry know of them if you're commissioning data centers, but like I said, the contractors do use the same levels. So if you're doing the stage approach, your levels will help you, right? Because you can break every level by stages. So during 2B, for example, right? The static testing. These are your ISTs that the contractors are doing, right? So you can break that based on what has to be done in each phase, right? And then if this gets outlined in a schedule, so now you can track every activity individually. Does that make sense? Anybody has any questions on levels and the importance of levels? No? All clear?
Brilliant. Thank you all
Well,
so much for your time.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
I'm sure you'd much rather be doing other things on a Friday morning, but